In this episode, we're following the journey of one first home buyer who has conquered the mountain. We're going to hear about the lessons they learned, whether their assumptions were right or wrong, and the mistakes they made, and those that were avoided, and ultimately how they sealed the deal.
Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to move it along and become homeowners. But most importantly, it is for you to become an educated home buyer.
I'm Megan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum. But it's a good thing because between us we've got over 45 years experience to share with you and bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together, we're going to make sure you get unbiased and real information you can rely on. Allow us to guide you on your home buying journey. We want you to become an educated home buyer so that you can stop looking for your first home and actually become a proud homeowner.
We've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au, and there you'll get access to our free mini course, How to Price a Property Like a Professional. You will also find the holy grail of home buying education, Your First Home Buyer Guide, the online course for people who want to become educated home buyers. We created this for you to help you get on the right path to home ownership for your first home and beyond.
But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, we've got the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes the time to understand your personal situation. We've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording. Things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority and your trusted advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
Heidi is a Home Buyer Academy graduate, and we're so excited to be sharing her story today. And now, thank you so much for coming along, Heidi. Before I get you to say hello, in the video behind Megan's head is Heidi's really pretty house.
Isn't that just gorgeous? She's like a grand old lady that is just itching to be updated, but has all the traditional features, just so pretty.
So, hello, Heidi. Thanks for coming along and telling us your story. We'll want to find out all about the prettiness on the inside and the outside of this house, but welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be here.
We are so grateful that you're going to share your story because I would imagine as part of your process, you've probably listened to some other people's stories as well along the way. But let's start at the beginning. When did you first decide that you wanted to buy a property?
Oh, I'd say many, many years ago. Ever since I was little, I always thought that was the goal and that was what you were working towards. And gradually, as I hit my 20s, I guess I started really saving intensely with that in mind. In fact, my first savings account was labelled House. That was the title for the savings
How old were you?
Oh, probably like 19.
Oh, that is so impressive.
Fantastic. I love that.
Do you know, I mean, this is embarrassing to say for me, but when I was a teenager, I had a picture of a BMW on the back of my bedroom door. So who could guess who was going to who was going to become a real estate agent? And, you know, never thought of buying a house or an apartment. I just thought about buying a fast car. So I love the fact that you are much more sensible than me. Now, without giving too much away, except your age, basically, how long has it taken you from when you first started saving to when you bought?
I don't know exactly, but maybe. Yeah, it depends when you say you start saving, because it's been ever since I started earning, but maybe like 6 or 7 years.
Right. So that was about how long it took to gather your deposit?
Yeah, I'd say so.
And how did you do that? What were some of the things that you did along the way? And this, honestly, this is a question that we get asked a lot. How can I speed up my deposit savings?
Well, obviously I didn't have any avocado on toast in that time.
So you never got used to
so
spending
you were going
money.
Out to, yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Not a spender. Righto.
Yeah.
That's a good starting point.
I think that's really it. I worked a lot of overtime and a lot of weekend shifts and everything. Working very hard, multiple jobs was really the main truth, honestly. I didn't necessarily go for a higher paying job or anything, but I just kept slaving away and just watching it. I don't have any special tricks. I do feel, though, because I had the hope that I could do it, it was a bit easier to make some of the sacrifices.
Mm.
Whereas, say, talking to my partner who had never really had the hope of buying a house, he was more likely to spend on those little luxuries, the coffees out and so on, all the little things that do add up, just because there wasn't any hope there was any value behind saving that money. It wouldn't get anywhere. So I feel like
really
having that
interesting.
confidence that you can do it was a big part of it.
I'm just thinking about that, Veronica, and it's almost like that's the mindset of every little cumulative bit adds to the pot. And I believe that if I just keep adding to the pot, that the pot will get big enough, versus, as you say, not necessarily having that mindset of I feel I'm capable of doing this. So it doesn't matter if I spend that $10 or that $15 or that $30, because what else am I going to do with it? Incredibly different mindset.
It is, isn't it? And a lot of people talk about mindset as if it's some sort of woo-woo thing, and then, oh, well, if I just, if I just focus on what I want, it will just magically happen. The universe will send it my way. Versus if I focus on what I want and believe it's achievable, I'll actually behave in the way that I need to behave in order to make it happen, and therefore it will happen. And so I think that's really what you're saying, isn't it, Heidi? We're putting words in your mouth here. We're going a bit woo-woo on you. But
it's one of those moments go, oh, that's something that we can really help people to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you as a child, like you said, as a child, you always just thought that that's just really what you're going to move towards as soon as you're earning. And so you've done everything with that in mind. When did you start learning about how to buy a property?
Probably in the year before I bought. I had seen family members do it, but I don't think they really understood the process in great detail. So I'd say within the last probably 6 months before I bought was when I really doubled down and started listening to all of your podcasts and everything.
So that was your inroad to becoming a student. You started with the podcast. Great. That's good.
Now, I'm curious, and I don't want you to dump your family in the shit or anything, but, you've obviously taken a bit of time to observe what's going on around you, and I'm sure it's not just your family, but other people as well. What is it that sort of made you think, hang on, I'm not so certain they're doing it the way I want to do it? What made you think, I want to do it differently, or I need to learn more about this?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that.
As I said, it's hard to do without dumping people in the shit. So we don't want you to do that. And maybe if you can't answer that right now, maybe it'll come to you as we're going through this conversation.
Yeah, and look, it might not just be family that you observed along the way, but friends as well. Sometimes you see people jump into something a little bit too quickly or without some of the forethought. And I just congratulate you on taking the step to actually educate yourself, so that you did do it with a lot of information, and you're a careful, considered person, and you really took the time to learn. Can you tell us then maybe a little bit about the type of property you're originally looking for? Did that change along the way? Because we did have a look at a couple with you in Campfire when you came to the pointy end, but was there a process along the way that changed a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. When I started, I was looking more at a lower price point. I was always thinking that the goal was to get as cheap as you can. And this, I suppose, came also from my family, what we were talking about, that you aim to get something that's as cheap as you can possibly get. The quality doesn't have to be great. The comfort doesn't have to be great, just as long as you get in.
Right,
and
yep.
To spend the bare minimum that you can so that you can pay off your mortgage as fast as you possibly can. And I guess that also included being further away from town centres or anything as well. And over time, I was gradually realising maybe it was worth spending that little bit more, because I suppose I started to see through your course and through your podcasts and through the campfires that this is an asset. If I spend more on this, I'm not throwing that money away. I'm not losing that money. That's an asset that will still hold its value, and I'll be able to recoup that if I need. And that, in fact, it might appreciate better because it's a better quality asset. that was a really big change for me.
Yeah, and that's such a big thing to get around because I know people who are not property people or they're property cynics, and they're like, oh, well, that's all you property people. You're always talking up the market. You're always saying people should spend more. And it's like, oh, no, there are situations where people should not spend more. But if by spending less, you're compromising your lifestyle in a way that also is compromised for future people when they go to buy your property, and they won't look at that as favourable as in a better position for lifestyle, for example, or if by spending less, you're not buying a property that's big enough for you, and so you're going to outgrow it really fast. Those sorts of things can really curtail your future opportunities. And so I think that's what you're talking about here, because you bought in Ballarat, right? But you live in Melbourne. You're not from Ballarat. So you've had to go and learn about a whole new area, but you've had to make a decision and to buy in a place that you're not originally from. So what led you to do that? Because even that, some people will go, oh my God, don't do that. You know what I mean? So you've gone and made some big decisions along the way, as well as deciding to go against, I guess, the trend in your family. What led you to go down that path?
I guess it was balancing up different things that mattered to me in my life. Did I want a big backyard? How did I want my career to go and everything? I realised to stay where I was, I would have to either wait a lot more years or I would have to end up in a small apartment, which wasn't what I wanted. I really did want to. I did value garden and ability to go to beautiful places. So I decided it was clear I had to move somewhere, whether that was a bit further out in Melbourne where I was, or whether that was going to another town centre. And then I realised that by going somewhere like Ballarat, I still have probably pretty equivalent access to the centre of Melbourne that I would have had if I went further out of Melbourne.
Yes.
In the, further outer suburbs.
Yeah.
It takes the same amount of time on public transport or cars to go to this regional town where you have everything there, but you can also still get back to see everyone. And I also knew from a career perspective, I'm planning to be a nurse. And I knew that would offer me a really good hospital and everything to work.
So there's a few things that really came in together for you. It must have been, as you say, really challenging. And as Veronica pointed out, you were in Melbourne with your life and your partner and your friendship circles, but you were trying to learn about Ballarat. And in doing that, I know in Campfire we talked a little bit about, getting your feet on the ground. What was the difference for you between seeing things online and actually physically getting out there and seeing them in person?
I don't know if you're a train going past.
No, I didn't.
No, you can't? Okay. It was absolutely night and day for me, looking at something on paper versus actually physically seeing it in person. On paper, you don't really see everything that's around the house itself. You just see the house itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the thing that surprised me most, I always expected that houses would look better on paper and they would look terrible in person. I actually found it went both ways. Sometimes a house that I had no interest in would suddenly seem much better in person. And so I found that on paper you can eliminate some things, but I just couldn't really tell which way it would go for each individual property. So I had to actually be there, be in the neighbourhood, get the whole feel before I understood.
And it's so true what you're talking about. And so many people seem to think that they can just buy online. It's as you say, it's like night and day. But also being there yourself, you have to get used to a new area, like a new location, and think, okay, can I see myself living here? Are we, is this where we are going to become part of the community? And you have to be there to get a feel for that, I fully believe. Now, we never met your partner. You always came to Campfire on your own, and I know that you spoke about your partner and their involvement as well. So it wasn't like you're doing this all by yourself. But clearly you're the one that, like you said, you're the one who felt the potential that this can be part of your reality. And he sort of realised that by virtue of being around you, I guess. But so tell me how did that work in terms of you spearheading all the activity, the learning, the direction of your property search? Did you find that he was a willing participant, happily able to go along with what your findings had revealed or you decided upon, or was there a bit of argy-bargy and debate in the middle of it all?
I'd say mostly he was willing to listen to the things that I was saying. I would also direct him to certain podcasts or things so that he, like anything that I felt was really relevant, I would try to show the proof of that or direct him to learn about it himself, because you can't just listen to someone else the whole time and just accept that. At times there were some difficulties where we just disagreed about what mattered and what was important. But on the whole, we were able to navigate it reasonably smoothly. But I think being able to point to if you have an opinion, being able to point to a source for it was very helpful. Like, for instance, a specific podcast or a specific piece of podcast, or in your course, obviously pointing to a specific page.
So you almost shortcut the process for him, but he was able to get involved in the relevant parts of the process that helped him to have a shared understanding with you. I call it outsourcing the advice. In a relationship, sometimes a couple may not necessarily give each other the credibility of a thought or a piece of advice, but as soon as it comes from somebody else, it's outsourced and come from an external, and it's almost like, oh, that's real. Like it, yeah, I get it now. Someone else said it, and it's one of those challenges in many relationships.
Now, when it came to choosing the actual house, though, because there were a few that we looked at and we talked through the pros and cons of during campfire. So what got you to the point of saying, this is the one?
I think just a lot of checking a lot of boxes was the main thing. It had a location that we were happy with. It was in the period style that we loved in a heritage area. It had the land size that we were looking for. And just by ticking off a lot of those boxes, when all the other ones that we'd seen always had some major gap that didn't work for it.
Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because you did bring a couple of properties to Campfire, and I'm interested in, I think you said at one stage, the mistake you almost made with buying the wrong house. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
So at the time that we made an offer on this property, it was, let me see, I think it was a Monday. We'd just gone for a second inspection to see it on the Saturday, and we discussed it in the campfire the Wednesday before, and we were thinking, yes, we like this. On Saturday that time, we also went to view another property completely off the bat. We weren't planning to look at it seriously because we knew it had some major compromises, but we still went to it as just part of our due diligence, going to see everything that we possibly could. And we just somehow fell in love with some part of that other property.
It really pulled at your heartstrings, didn't it?
It really did. Even though I knew on paper, and the reason I had never meant to inspect it in the first place, I knew on paper that there were big problems with it. In this case, it had a giant set of overhanging flats that were just hideous.
On the northern side too,
on the northern side.
Cold Ballarat.
Unavoidable flats.
Yes. There's no screening those flats out.
Yeah. And it's interesting though, I always wondered with you, because you said, it did tug at your heartstrings. It was a pretty house, and it's actually a really nice street too. It's just that they're just literally the worst house on that nice street, which is why buying the worst house on best street is not always the best thing to buy. But yes, because it couldn't be overcome. And I could tell, once you're inside the house, you could see, but then you started sort of making excuses for, we'll get used to that. We'll do this and that. And I wonder how much of that was because it felt cheap. And it would have felt cheap because of the apartments, of course, but it felt cheap. And it's like, this feels safer. Was that something, do you think, that was impacting on your approach to that house?
Absolutely. The price tag was much lower, but it also felt like the homes that I'd grown up in all my life.
A lot of familiarity.
I think that more than anything else.
So you had a nice childhood, obviously, because otherwise you'd have
With a lot of charm.
Yeah, yeah. You'd be thinking, I don't want a house anything like what my
Well,
home was.
it was very, very, very much a Nana's house kind of thing. Very dated internally, but in a way that felt comforting to me. And I'd always pictured getting something cheap and then doing it up rather than, I always felt like I would be wasting money if I spent it on something that was already nice and updated. And I suppose that was a hangover again from all the things I'd been taught in my life from my family. And I think it was also just a last minute kind of panic thing of, I'm just about to lock this thing in. And I had a quick, am I doing the right thing? I kind of second guessed it. And that's why I also went for the other at the same time. I think that's really what it was.
Shit's getting real. So we did sit down there. We're in Campfire. We sat down there. We really compared the two properties, didn't we? And there was a couple of things about the property you ultimately bought, which was not the one with the ugly flats next to it. The one you ultimately bought, you had a couple of misgivings. Now, I probably don't need to jog your memory on that. Do you want to talk us through what you were thinking? Because I know that in my mind, I thought, she's a little bit limited in what she's looking at here. And I think because you probably thought it was too nice and so therefore there was nothing you could do. But what were the misgivings you had and how did you work through them in your mind?
With the house we've bought, there was some, I guess I had misgivings that there was very little that I could do to add to it just because it was superficially nicely done inside. There was shiny new floorboards and a new kitchen and all the things that I'd always picture I'd never pay for that because I'd instead do the hard work to make it myself, and that way I'd save money or something. But some of the floor plan layout for it also wasn't great, and we can tell that already. Being there, we can see the limitations of certain parts of the floor plan. I guess you gave me more confidence that that was something we would be able to work on, though.
Yeah.
I always felt that was something that's just going to be too big and to deal with.
It's funny, isn't it? Because we sort of look at cosmetic upgrades like, painting and new floorboards and stuff like that and think, that we can add value that way. I don't want to pay for somebody else's spruce up. But that, because we looked at the floor plan, we poured over it and we worked through a couple of options for you. It's all internal and we were like, my God, you really add value to that house by changing.
Changing a few walls.
Yeah.
Actually, the walls were already there. It was actually enclosing.
Yeah.
Or changing a couple of rooms a little bit.
Yeah.
And you weren't undoing anything that had already been done.
Exactly. And
that was the exciting bit. Yeah.
It's interesting, though, because often we talk about those cosmetic upgrades that really add value. But the reality is this if you can change a floor plan without major structural work, then you really are adding value. And so we were excited about that.
Yeah. And I guess that's something that I couldn't see without the experience that you had. It would never have occurred to me because I would only have thought of the superficial cosmetic things and everything else seemed impossible. And so your experience...
That was a fun campfire, actually. Veronica and I were just on fast forward. We can move that. You could put that there. What about that? There's 3 walls and you're done. Yep.
Yeah, so we're excited about that. But again, because it's in really nice condition, there's no pressure on you to do that straight away.
Yeah.
And obviously as first-time buyers, you've put everything at buying the thing. And so you just take your time on that and knowing that when the time has come to do a proper value add, you can do it. But in the meantime, you're actually in a nice, comfortable,
lovely,
appealing home.
Yeah, and none of those things that are problems with the floor plan are major or urgent for us either. We're completely happy with living with it how it is right now. So that made it even better.
And your other drawback was out the back of the house, wasn't it? So do you want to tell us about that?
So out the back, there was a really, really big shed. Well, there still is a really, really big shed. And then most of the garden was just concrete, which we're very interested in having a proper garden and growing our own veggies and all of the things you think of. And that felt like a big drawback to me because it didn't feel like there was enough garden for what I wanted. And then the suggestion through the campfires was considering, is it possible to take down the garage? Is that going to or take down part of it, or is that going to really impact the property value? And so that also gave us a really good insight into what we could do. We haven't fully decided at this point, but we just felt so much freer knowing we had those different options so that we can choose what we need to do whenever it works for us.
Yeah, and I love that too, because the reality is that we make better decisions once we've lived in a place for a while.
Yeah.
And then it'll dawn on you one day to go, I know what we're going to do with that. You know, whether you just dig up the concrete around it, or whether you demolish the whole thing, or whether you open up one side and turn it into a cabana, whatever you choose to do with it, it will come to you, because you'll be living there and you'll be noticing where the sun hits, you'll be noticing all those sorts of things, and then it'll be a better resolution than if you sort of felt like you had to do anything before moving in. So that's pretty exciting.
Yep. And so we're planning to rip up all of the concrete and turn that part into garden straight away.
Job,
that
but will be amazing when it's done, because you're very earthy and you like to be connected to the earth, and getting rid of some of those hard surfaces will really change the feeling of that backyard. And I can't wait to see the progress for you. Now, did you buy, was it private treaty or auction was the process that you purchased under?
Private treaty.
So tell us about that process.
I guess the market that we bought into was a bit more of a buyer's market, which is something that, even though I'd gone through things, I hadn't really realised so much until talking to you. In this case, it was relatively simple. The previous place that we had put in an offer on, we hadn't been successful for. In this case, though, we did go through all of the pricing research and so on, and comparables and everything, and ended up deciding we could put in an offer that was below the asking price.
Yeah.
We also told them at the time that we were putting an offer on another place, which we were, as we discussed, and they did actually come back and accept our first offer. So it was actually surprisingly simple in this case. I think more simple than in a lot of cases.
Very different. I mean, we're recording this in April 2024, where in most locations it is still a seller's market and it is really tough for buyers. But where you're able to look at some of those statistics, and we're able to sit in campfire and talk through the speed, how quickly things were moving, the supply side of things, and have an analysis of the market, not just the individual properties. And it just gave you, I could just see that you felt that much more in control and comfortable about, putting that bit of pressure on the seller, because that was okay in that situation.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? When we do get out and start looking for a property, we're so focused on our own journey that we often don't take a moment to just step back and think, well, what's happening in the rest of the market? Because it always seems hard, and so for you to find it easier than you expected it to be, which is all very nice, but that it comes from an awareness of what the market was doing. And obviously we're talking through that and those signs that you're looking for. And, you do negotiate differently based on what the rest of the market is doing. And so it's really important to have we always, talk about having a strategy. It's like you've got to do all your research and you've got to have a plan of how you're going to approach making that offer, how you find out about the agent's offer process and all those sorts of things that we sort of take you through that step by step. So we're always happy to see that it comes about so neatly, but not without disappointment with the other property first up. So it's not like it was just, you didn't just breeze
you just waltz
through.
in and buy the first one. It was easy. Yeah.
Nonetheless, I was in a better position, a luckier position, I suppose, where we were choosing to buy at the time.
Yeah, 100%.
And a lot of people are.
Yeah. Now, how long did the entire process take? So once you decided on Ballarat and then you started physically going and inspecting, because you've been sort of looking from afar, as you said, it's very different when you get there. Once you actually started literally, feet on the ground, pounding the pavement, looking at properties, how long before you bought?
It was a few months. I can't remember the exact dates. We would have first gone up and inspected in maybe October or September. And then we ended up buying end of January, I think we would have signed. So it was a few months.
Yeah.
But I honestly could have made it more. It could have been better if I'd made it even more. I mean, I felt internally in a hurry, even though I had no real need to be.
Mm.
And
There are other circumstances around that.
Yeah.
That you wanted to get things sorted before other events happened in your life.
But I feel like that was some of the greatest value that you offered, was that no matter how much you can learn intellectually, and I'm really good at learning things intellectually and learning technically what's the best kind of thing you can do. But when it comes to the emotional side of it, I still don't fully always have the ability to manage that, my level of stress and so on. And having people to bounce that off and to rein me in and calm me down was something that I really needed.
Fantastic, because
That's
you know,
great.
so many people do come to us similar to yourself. You know, they like to learn. They really like to apply themselves to the technique, if you like, of something. But that won't completely remove the emotion, because it's still a very emotional process buying a property. And that's one of the reasons we have Campfire every week, is to keep you on the straight and narrow and give you those guardrails. And so we're just so excited for you. Now that you've settled, how do you feel now that you have a mortgage?
Really, really, really good.
Wow.
Oh, great. Because sometimes for some people that fear of having a debt is quite overwhelming. So that's interesting to hear that you feel good about the decision, not burdened by it.
Yeah. I figure if we're ever in a position where it's really, really terrible, we will have options to sell. We'll have options in the future. But now that I'm here, I no longer need to prove anything to anyone. All of your life, renting is always proving to people that you can afford it and proving that you can keep it clean and look after it. And same with getting a mortgage. It's constantly presenting proof again and again and again. Yes, I can afford this, so on. Now it's entirely in my hands. I feel like I'm in control. I don't need to prove to anyone anymore. I just need to prove to myself that I can pay it and I can work harder if I need to, or I can do things. So I feel really, really relieved. And
I've not thought of it from that angle, Veronica. That's a really different way of thinking about it, and quite. I just wonder if we do a little bit more work around that, because that is a different way of looking at it. You don't have to prove anymore.
You just proved yourself now. You have to prove to anybody else, like you said.
In your hands.
Yeah, I love it.
I mean, I still have to prove to the bank by sending them the money, but
That's just delivering on your promises.
Monthly delivery. So now you got you're not moving in immediately like a lot of people do. They sort of rush to move in. The part of that is location, because you've got to finish up some studies, right? What's the plan? You're going to move in, and then how long do you think you're going to live in this property for?
Not exactly sure. We can probably see around 10 years being quite reasonable.
It's got room to grow.
Yeah. We're already on Marketplace buying lots of extra furniture and like a spare mattress and so on, because we actually have room to put all of it. So we've never had before living in a Melbourne unit.
Oh yeah.
So we can
Friends
see
visiting.
plenty.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I'm not wishing this on you, but maybe there's kids in the future and all that sort of palaver. I'm not wishing it on you because you're still young and you're studying, and let's face it, there's plenty of time. But, having friends to come up and visit, that'll be heaps of fun as well. And like you say, you want to grow veggies and really get into it. That's real lifestyle. That's real living, isn't it? In really enjoying your home in so many ways. So question for you now. What advice do you have for someone who is thinking about doing your first home buyer guide, the course, but, they're still on the fence?
I would say just go for it and make sure you go to the campfires, because in my opinion, that's where you will just get your absolute bang for your buck. The best you can have is really being able to get tailored and personalized advice to your exact situation, rather than just the generic. Not generic, but our podcast or so on will cover a broad situation for everyone. Whereas in the campfires, you're able to go and get exactly what's happening to you, look at the exact houses you're looking at, and get a really professional opinion on those. And the difference that made to us was huge. I'm just still so relieved every day that we made the decision we did make with your advice, rather than the other decisions we could have made. And I just think it's so worth it.
Well, that's wonderful. And we're
you,
so
Heidi.
stoked as
We are
well.
so happy for you.
Yeah, we really are. Because
And remember, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to us what property you buy as long as it's the right property for you. So there's,
Yeah.
you know, you could buy any one of those. And as long as you went into it with your eyes wide open,
not
and
the one
making
with
the
the unit next door.
Well, we
No,
wouldn't
you
be happy
couldn't
with
buy
that, but-
that one. Any of the other ones, though, yeah.
But you know what I mean? You know, it doesn't matter to us where it is, what it is, as long as you've got all the information to make that decision. And I think that is the process and the journey that we just enjoy so much with people like you, and seeing you come out the other side and feel proud of what you've achieved.
Yeah,
I
we're
feel
very
proud.
proud of you. Yeah, absolutely. All right.
Heidi, that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, because there are other people like you out there who can really learn from what you've done and what you've experienced and the mistakes that you didn't make through that process. A quick note, you might think that we cover everything you need to know in these podcasts, but of course, a word of warning, we do not. We just scratch the surface. If you really want to be an educated first home buyer, you need to learn all of the steps and how to do everything in the right order.
Our first home guide course only costs $990, and you get direct access to us, as Heidi has told you, to help guide you through your negotiations. Now, trust me, trust us, we're real estate agents. You will overpay a hell of a lot more than $1,000 if you don't know what you're doing.
In this episode, we've only touched on a tiny part of the huge amount of things you need to know to become an educated first home buyer. There is so much more for you to do. You can learn all of the steps in the right order and avoid all of the mistakes that others have made in our 10-step online course for first home buyers.
If you'd like to learn more about the right process and avoid making rookie errors, become an educated home buyer. Head over to the website, check out your first home buyer guide, the course that we have created for you. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you've liked what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. It helps other people find us. And of course, I know it's a bit cringy, but we're going to ask for 5 stars. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you've found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with more priceless stuff.